Asmongold hits the nail on the head about woke journalists. I want these people to suffer because that's what they did to me. What goes around comes around, and we're coming. You should have left my video games alone.
I'll show you. Like, people think I'm f***ing crazy. I'm not. Look at this. People wonder our tax.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Getting back to the most pressing issue of all time. How Politico actually got paid by the federal government to undermine gamers, which is really funny because the exact opposite actually happened, where someone actually did work with gamers in general and was very closely associated with Donald Trump. His name is Steve Bannon, and he actively used Breitbart to try to drum up Gamergate narratives, knowing full well that it would be very helpful. They'd be willing participants who would be helpful in doing propaganda for the Trump administration if he were to win. This is literally real. So if there's one aspect of the government that has been pro-gamer, it is Steve Bannon and the Trump administration by way of Steve Bannon. Remember that this is the average American IQ before the Department of Education is dismantled. Gamergates being freaks and then being mad at people covering them being freaks. Yeah, how could they have done this to me?
People wonder our tax dollars used to promote wokeness in video games. Answer is yes. USAID paid Politico millions of dollars a year to write pieces like this one, which promotes diversity and describes Gamergate as...
Dude, oh my God. This is just wrong, man. I don't know how to explain it. It's just wrong. The worst part about it is that things like what they are suspecting with USAID have occurred in the past in terms of like the State Department aligning itself with media directly, the CIA actively infiltrating American media as well in an effort to manufacture consent. Nowadays, it's more nefarious. Nowadays, there is no direct involvement, especially when it comes to domestic media, or the direct involvement is out in the open when you have a guy like John Bolton speak on CNN, okay, and say things like, yeah, I've done a lot of coups. In terms of USAID, they paid for a subscription-based service similar to a Bloomberg terminal, okay? Politico Pro. It's real-time. It's a real-time newswire. That's it. It's worse than what these guys suspect. They don't need to pay Politico to do pro-State Department propaganda. How is he so popular, man? Is it that easy? Yes, it is that easy. Straight up. Claiming that the USAID actually funded Politico to write articles and influence articles, specifically targeting gamers, by the way, is like saying they actually funded Microsoft to also target gamers because they bought Excel. They bought Microsoft Word subscriptions. I can't believe it. How deep does this rabbit hole go? It's ironic, though, because the real way that there is like active glad handling happening with American media when they're covering domestic issues and the American government is done by way of access journalism. There are a million different ways in which the government could also actively fund these outlets as well, whether it be giving them grants or whether it be, buying advertising space if they chose to do so. And they do that sort of stuff anyway. Doing it through USAID would be one of the silliest ways to do it. They covered Gamergate because USAID has a designated task force in between trying to, undermine the Cuban government by setting up like a fake internet or another failed initiative where they try to like task rappers in rapping about how Fidel Castro sucks or whatever on Cuban soil. They're actually on the weekends spending time attacking gamers. Nobody gives a fuck. In the grand scheme of things, nobody cares about gamers. If you think that there's this level of interest in the government oppressing gamers, you are out of your mind. I don't know what to tell you. I cannot believe that this is like actual commentary on the realm of politics, and it's getting a lot of motion. It's 700,000 views. Yeah, the U.S. government made Stellar Blade's titties smaller. We must investigate. We are the most persecuted minority. I can't believe that we've gotten here. This is reality now.
With the glass ceiling broken, all the oppressed groups shall prosper, especially the most oppressed group of all, gamers.
That's where we're at now. Like, low key. This is not even something shit that we used to joke about in terms of like, oh no, you came after gamers, is like unironically a rallying call now. It's no longer a meme. It's reality. People do legitimately believe this. It's crazy. Asmongold is the Fred Hampton of Gamergate. A real threat to the established order is gamers. The American government does not want you to jerk off to big-tittied main characters. They do not want that. They will do everything to stop that.
So this is the thing, guys. I want these people to suffer because that's what they did to me. I want to set an example.
What did they do to Asmongold? Like, what is happening? What have they done to Asmongold? They made his games bad? Oh my God.
Get rid of these people. Put them, like, completely out of their jobs. Get rid of them. Make an example of them. Say, listen, this is what happens. Gamers rise up. What goes around? Yep, what goes around comes around. And we're coming.
How did they, someone in the chat said, how do they make you suffer? 4 years of a destruction of my favorite games. Fight fire with fire. Like, this reads as a parody. And if someone had actually sent this to me as a joke and they were like, look, Asmongold is doing parody of like the sweatiest nerd you've ever seen. Isn't this funny? I'd be like, yeah, this is actually pretty good. It's pretty solid in terms of parody. Turns out it's not. This is something truly, this is something that like, you know, lolly PFP accounts unironically believe. I really don't understand. Can you explain, please, what's happening? Here, let me uncover the layers of misinformation. Number one, USAID's funding gets cut. The Trump administration rolls back USAID initiatives. Okay, USAID, created by JFK, is a separate department that is tasked with doing aid all around the world. A big chunk of that is to beef up America's soft power capabilities, but also a big chunk of that is also to engage in covert operations at the behest of the CIA to engage in foreign destabilization against our foreign adversaries, which leads me to be confused by Trump's decision overall, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so obviously the aid for soft power or even to, defend American destabilization in other nations is still actively a good. And you can't have that, okay? According to the Trump administration, you can't do something that helps people, even if it is aiding a larger cause that will end up aligning with American interests. You can't do that. God forbid. That's the first start of the story. And as Philip DeFranco also correctly explained here, there was a technical error with Politico paying their staffers, but that kickstarted the story of people claiming, oh, it's because USAID was funding the entirety of Politico. Let's take a look.
Shots from a government website tracking federal spending showing that Politico received $8 million from the government in the 2024 fiscal year, with former Fox News producer Kyle Becker sharing these screenshots and saying, fun fact, Politico received USAID funds, or seemingly claiming that the $8 million came from USAID alone. And then, in a follow-up post, he connected Politico's late payroll with the recent crackdowns on USAID's spending. And from there, the situation just exploded, with big names on the right chiming in and spreading this far and wide. And even had Trump on Truth Social this morning saying that...
Yeah, that's the other aspect of this, that Donald Trump is just straight up saying that this is fact. It's not. I just want to reiterate, this is incorrect, which is crazy. I don't like Politico. I'm not the biggest fan of USAID. And here I am having to seemingly defend it because I'm not defending either of these institutions. I'm simply defending the truth. Also, double L stolen. Looks like billions of dollars have been stolen at USAID and other agencies. Much of it is going to the fake news media as a payoff for creating good stories about the Democrats. The left-wing rag known as Politico seems to have received... By the way, Politico is not a left-wing rag. Politico is not left-wing at all. What is happening here? Saying that Politico is a left-wing institution is insane. It's owned by a right-wing German guy. And not only that, but also... it's just not left-wing at all. Their coverage is not even remotely left-wing at all. It's not the point, and some people won't believe it, but Biden, White House hated Politico. When I worked there, the Biden team constantly complained that Politico embodied the problem with journalism today. Too insidery, too focused on horse race coverage scandal, and too both-sidism. Also, this is ironic because the Biden White House was actively and aggressively anti-media for no reason whatsoever. Hey, I'm sorry. Can you explain what any of this has to do with gamers, Gamergate, or Asmon? It literally doesn't. The truth has nothing to do with gamers, Gamergate, or Asmongold. But the truth does not matter. That's the point. Because Asmongold is claiming that on top of this misinformation that came out, that he wanted to add his own layer of silliness to the conversation by, I guess, reading a tweet from a Lolly account, a Lolly PFP account, that claimed that Politico was actually getting paid by USAID to do anti-gamer coverage. It's probably the most ridiculous thing that could have come out of this. It's so ridiculous. I feel like even the Fox News people would laugh at this shit.
Then, with all this, there's been a whole lot of pushback against this narrative. With, for example, the Washington Post pointing out that if you look deeper into the government spending website, you'll see that USAID gave Politico only $44,000 during the fiscal years of 2023 and 2024. Right, and that was reportedly for subscriptions to an energy and environment publication that the company produces. And then that $8 million, right, the amount the entire government spent on Politico last year, most of that reportedly came from contracts from subscriptions to their premium service. In fact, you had the Post reporting that just days ago, the White House's Office of the National Cyber Director signed a $35,000 contract for a Politico Pro premium subscription for 15 users. With that service, tracking, analyzing, and providing updates on the entire public policy landscape. I mean, for example, the Post reports that committees led by Republicans dropped $500,000 on Politico subscriptions in the first 9 months of last year, with 38 Republicans in the House reportedly spending $300,000 for subscriptions within the same time period. But follow to stay in the loop.
That's it. USAID is not funding Politico. Politico does pro-State Department propaganda because that's what the American media is tasked with doing. They don't need to get paid directly by the government. They don't need to be incentivized in that way. The incentive structure nowadays is simply elevating people who already get that level of access. The incentive structure revolves around access. They play ball with the government and beef up government narratives and rarely ever undermine the established hierarchy, because those are the people that get elevated to the top. They are stenographers. But in terms of like the USAID paying for a political subscription, Politico Pro subscription, that makes sense. Is USAID something that was exclusively used by the Democrats? No, of course not. What? No, obviously not. It is, just like everything else with foreign interference or foreign policy, is uniparty. It's bipartisan. Wait, Joe on the crazy USAID spending being uncovered? I just never thought I could spend years and years talking about USAID being utilized in incredibly inappropriate ways. Okay. And these guys are just destroying. These guys actively have destroyed that. They've undermined it. It's like saying the CIA is woke. We need to shut it down. Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like Joe Rogan starts talking about how the CIA is doing woke and gay in other countries and we have to put an end to it, you know? And then they do. I feel like you can get these guys to be on board with anything as long as you say it's woke and gay.
USAID thing that's going on. You know, Mike Benz has been on that like a pit bull, and I've been following him on X, and he's going to come back on here and kind of explain everything. But he explained it the last time he was here, and I don't think I really grasped it until Elon's 6 wizards. They brought in some young wizards to go in there and go over the books, and they are just finding crazy shit. It's great, and it's so interesting. I was listening to a left-wing podcast today. I like to mix it up. You know, I listen to all kinds of different stuff, and it was like I was listening to a different world. Like, they weren't even talking about all of this corruption and all this obvious buying of influence. Instead, they were talking about aid overseas and how people are going to starve. And I'm like,
it's mind-boggling, and
yeah, because the truth is both. No, if he was listening to me, he would have heard me say that USAID both works to do soft power with actually good initiatives like, you know, anti-famine initiatives or, you know, trying to stop the spread of disease, but also simultaneously they do a whole deal of, I mean, they basically are a part of the State Department in general, not directly under it, but they work in collaboration with the State Department to advance America's agenda. How did they help out in Gaza? Here's a great example. They made a memo in Gaza where they escalated this memo all the way to Anthony Blinken, where they were like, there's a famine happening in Gaza. Anthony Blinken read the memo and said, yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead and say, no, that's not the case.
upset at the general pattern of a failure to recognize how right those of us who hypothesized that there was a racket that had overtaken our entire governance structure, we turn out to be absolutely right about this, and no one's going to mention it. That's mind-blowing.
It's very strange that the media is ignoring it, especially the left-wing media. It's just too big of a win for the right And so they're just ignoring it. And then they're just highlighting the good things that USAID did, which I'm sure it probably did. Probably had to do some good things to like at least justify its existence.
As a cover story, I'm not even sure. Maybe it doesn't change anything. Obviously, this was a mechanism used to funnel money to all sorts of things that we didn't vote on, that don't make sense in light of our constitutional structure. And
This is amazing. They've arrived at somewhat of a correct conclusion, but from the opposite side. Like, what do they mean by this? I don't understand when they're saying like, oh, the USAID is doing like unconstitutional stuff, that it's an influence peddling operation. And I don't know what they mean when they say this. They can't possibly mean like USAID is utilized to sometimes destabilize foreign adversaries. Like, there's no way, because I feel like they would like that. These guys are pro-American empire. They think it's like DEI, woke and gay to say that you're not pro-American empire. So I think it's just the mere words that they hear of woke and DEI, and they go, oh, it's a bad thing.
They gave $27 million to the George Soros Prosecutor Fund. So our own government is funding this left-wing lunatic who is hiring the most insane prosecutors who are letting people out of jail who commit violent crimes.
And that's exactly how this racket worked.
What are they talking? Chat, I'm asking in all sincerity. I have no. What is the George Soros Prosecutor Fund? I know that conservatives always say like woke DAs are being hired by George Soros. There's like 8 different conspiracies that they tied together. East West Management Institute, an organization partnered with George Soros, Open Society Foundations in the last 15 years. This isn't prosecutors though. This is American foreign policy. I hate George Soros. These guys don't know why they hate George Soros. This is precisely the point. This is about Ukraine and other foreign efforts that the American State Department has. George Soros, among many other billionaires, was very interested in Ukraine far before Russia invaded Ukraine. They do this by way of opening civil society organizations and NGOs that operate on the ground there, where they create like, a reasonable amount of support for the inevitable American intervention. I feel like if you were to explain to Joe Rogan like what USAID actually does, like if David Pacman sat him down and explained it to him as a positive, I think Joe Rogan would be on board with it. Many Republicans would be on board with it. They just hear George Soros and they lose their minds, I think. Yeah, look, according to its reports, funding primarily comes from USAID and the U.S. Department of State. Programs include judicial reform, legal aid, and rule of law initiatives in countries like Albania, Armenia, Cambodia, Georgia, as well as civil society training organizations such as in Kyrgyzstan and Uganda. Civil society training and nations. The Anti-Corruption Action Center, another Soros-backed entity, also lists USAID as its largest donor, providing 20% of its funding. The funding has drawn backlash, critics accusing USAID of acting as a personal piggy bank for Soros, who is known for his role in the collapse of the Eastern Bloc and alleged interference in domestic affairs. He didn't spend his own money to destroy American justice system. He used ours, one social media user commented. This is American foreign policy. This is in line with the American agenda globally. It's not against the American agenda globally. It's not what they think it is. This article is not talking about how George Soros is actually undermining the American legal institutions or whatever. George Soros also funds a bunch of programs and institutes that are tasked with American domestic affairs. But what they're talking about here is specifically foreign intervention. But once again, this is in line with Americans' agenda. I don't personally understand why the Trump administration or any number of different conservatives who like American foreign policy and American destabilization would turn around and get upset about this.
$330 million to help Afghanis grow crops. Like crops. I wonder what those crops are. What's their biggest crop, Brett?
It's going to be the poppy seeds for bagels, I'm thinking.
$200 million on an unused Afghani dam, $250 million on an unused Afghani road. This is wild.
He accepts all this all of this actually. Yeah, I don't think any of the stuff that they're mentioning is a lie. I think they massage it a little bit, like the condoms to Gaza or whatever. But what I don't understand is how he can't comprehend all of these initiatives advancing American interest. That's what I don't understand. Why does he think the American, a foreign aid agency under the control of the U.S. State Department is tasked with teaching Afghans how to do crops? And by the way, I doubt that it's poppy seeds. I bet it wasn't poppy seeds. I bet it was literally different crops that they wanted them to grow aside from the poppy seeds. Yeah, they don't need to learn how to grow poppy seeds. Assisted firms export 4.6 million in agricultural commodities. Afghanistan Value and Trades, High Value Crops, is a market-oriented project that operates throughout the country with regional offices in Kabul. It promotes sustainable agriculture-led economic growth in line with the Ministry of Agriculture. The American government does stuff like this all the time. It is weird how they talk about USAID like it only does good things. It is truly them shitting in their own bed. I just learned about USAID and I'm mad as hell. Every idiot Republican. I guess maybe they think like it's helping the Afghan population in any way is woke. Maybe. I don't know. These are all BS, cover-up charges to fund black projects. I mean, I'm inclined to believe that this might not even be a cover for poppy production. Like, USA does do stuff like this, chatters. What are you talking about? They need goodwill to be able to operate. If you want people to flip, if you want people to be subservient when you are dominating their country, you sometimes have to be interested in doing good things. So they do both. Of course, they do black budget operations. But they also do stuff like this. Afghanistan is the world's largest opium producer, but it's not their most produced crop. 70% of their farmland is used in growing wheat.
What the
Well, you have to realize that basically we had a shadow apparatus functioning, and it involves all kinds of things. It involves payoffs to people who didn't deserve them. It involves contracting to entities that were necessary to get the work done. So I don't think we can properly understand what these numbers mean and what they're actually being used for, but it was a racket.
Well, we were always wondering, like, why is our debt so high? Why is the national debt so high? Like, why is our deficit so insane? Well, this is it. I mean, how about the one where they paid $236 billion, like, for chargers? Do you know that they were trying to set up chargers?
You mean car chargers?
Car chargers.
And they only built a couple of them?
Excuse me. $40 billion for electric car ports. 8 ports have been built. You know how crazy that is? $40 billion.
I'm sorry. That's the beauty of the public-private partnership, baby.
But I have to say, as much as this is shocking, I wasn't surprised. I thought that effectively our entire system had been turned into a racket and that we were basically being fed a cover story from it. And it's weird to now have the evidence of this, but I think it was apparent that whatever had taken over our system wasn't interested in the well-being of average people, that it was interested in the power of the state to take people's resources and redistribute them, and that really is what's been going on for most of our adult lives.
And it's also important to note that this progressive, left-leaning, like radical left arm of the government, of the country.
This is what I mean. They're so stupid. I think they legitimately think that because aid is in the name and that is inherently a positive, like a good thing, like a moral, virtuous thing to do is give aid. They literally do not understand why this institution exists, and they just automatically say, oh, that's woke leftist nonsense, and therefore I'm against it. It's amazing. Right-wingers are such marks, dude. It's awesome. They're such suckers. Virtually every aspect of USAID also operates in the same vein of taking government funds and implementing market strategies so that these people are more susceptible to foreign capital takeovers. It's basically opening it up for any sort of intervention at the behest of foreign corporations. It's influence peddling so that America is still seen as the hegemonic superpower. This is all in line with things that I think Joe Rogan would want. That's such a cynical take. It is the correct take. Also, it's a cynical take. What do you think Democrats are saying right now in defense of USAID? They literally are saying what I'm saying. The only difference is I think that's an overall negative thing. even if it's doing good in the short term. Democrats, on the other hand, openly will go, no, it's a good thing. It's good that we're peddling our influence around the world. It's the same principle behind China sending Sinovacs to the Philippines. It's soft power. Do I agree with it just because it's China's doing? No, I agree with it because it's a good thing overall. The same principle goes for USAID. It's not a cynical take to admit reality. Not all soft power initiatives are bad inherently. Plenty of them are good. USAID is tasked with a lot of good things. Sometimes they also utilize that banner to do evil shit. Sterilization operations on indigenous populations, spying operations, sending in shipments of weapons under USAID contracts in countries that we want to destabilize, or even setting up a social media platform in a country that we want to destabilize with the specific task of trying to feed propaganda, like anti-government propaganda. There's a lot of that USAID does as well. But the overwhelming majority of stuff that USAID does is good, okay? Like maternal health. And yet it is still done for influence peddling. It's soft power. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
We're going to be waking up to the magnitude of that theft for quite some time.
I think this is going to take years. Chamath said that it's going to be like Iran-Contra on steroids. That's what he said. He said when you get to the bottom of all this, it's going to be insane. Because they haven't even got to the Medicaid yet. They haven't even got to the medical stuff.
Oh my God. I think these guys literally don't understand what they're saying. There is a shit ton of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. It's not the people that are doing it. It's corporations that are doing it. And they don't care about woke. I think these guys are so hyper-focused, so lasered in, so dialed in on like woke and DEI that they don't understand that this private-public partnership is done at the behest of corporations. They're like accidentally, by way of opposing DEI or woke or whatever, have arrived at a conclusion that I also have. Like if you're talking about Medicare and Medicaid fraud, it's people like Rick Scott. I don't think he realizes that he's like railing on a lot of these corporations that on its face he would probably defend, considering his right-wing perspective.
What's that, Jamie?
Was there reading an article about the spending on the Chargers? They said that they haven't actually, according to this, they haven't actually spent all that money yet.
Well, what do they do with it?
They've spent some of it to make some of those things, but it's just that hasn't been allocated yet. It's a long article going through all the...
Shut the fuck up, Jamie. That's not fair, man. Joe said he's not right-wing. Yeah, dude. Yeah. And I'm a blue dog Democrat, you know? That is so nutty. Joe Rogan literally endorsed Donald Trump. Right-wingers are so funny to me. They're always so like weirdly embarrassed by being right-wing, where they want to be right-wing and openly say the right is awesome and correct on everything while simultaneously running away from the branding. You can't endorse Donald Trump for president and then be like, I'm not right-wing at all. I don't know why people are saying that. I know why people are saying that. Because you endorsed Donald Trump. It's not even Donald Trump that made me understand that Joe Rogan was right-wing, however. I've talked about this before. It was actually his endorsement of Ron DeSantis. Because ain't nobody that isn't right-wing is endorsing Ronald McDonald DeSantis. You got to be a real die-on-the-wool, hardline right-winger to be like, yeah, that Ron DeSantis guy, he's great. Because he sucks. At least Donald Trump is like telegenic. He still has the capacity to capture the attention of like the I'm apolitical Andys who are too stupid to recognize what their politics look like. But nobody's saying I love Ron DeSantis unless they are a right-winger.
The spending that's been done, it's on factcheck.org.
Factcheck.org.
Oh, I knew he was going to come after factcheck. Oh, I don't believe that. That's probably also funded by USAID.
Runs that?
I don't know. Some of the chargers have been made. Some of them are on the way to be made. And they've built 61 at 15 stations since mid-August or through mid-August. 14,900 more are currently in some stage of development. But that's where it goes into like where they are, what they have to be done, and who's getting the money from them. It has to be done through a long process from each state.
Yeah, the question is, how can we get a proper accounting? As you point out, who the hell is factcheck.org?
Well, that's the problem with fact-checking organizations. That should really be illegal. Like, I think if you're a...
What? I mean, look, I get annoyed with the actually ass accounts as well. but saying fact checking should be illegal is crazy.
We should have stringent rules on what influence is being peddled, like who's paying for these fact checkers, who's behind the scenes, what is the it should be very transparent. How did you determine whether or not this was true or false? Because there are a lot of things that get said. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but
I mean, I don't know if I completely disagree with Joe Rogan on this issue, because there are a lot of quote unquote unbiased fact check or like media bias accounts out there, and then you investigate their funding a little bit, and it's just the Koch brothers, like Pointer, the Media Institute, that says I'm a serial misinformer and more of a misinformer than Alex Jones. That is a wholeheartedly unserious institution. That's it. Or SAN is another one, Straight Arrow News, literally owned by a right-wing billionaire. That is not a real fact-checking, unbiased fact-checking organization. That is a right-wing billionaire. We looked at it here. We found out about it on this broadcast. Ground News relies on some of these institutions as well, and therefore, who knows how valid their media bias ratings look like. But the difference is, I, unlike Joe Rogan, do not look at random guy like Hitler Groiper 14 posts from Facebook and Twitter and go, yeah, no, this guy's telling the absolute truth. And if someone were to fact check me on that, we should make it illegal for people to disagree with me.
Well, and it's an arms race. How can Pharma cloak the money that it's giving so that there's plausible deniability at the point that Elizabeth Warren is confronted, or Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders was hilarious. Only 1.5 billion. Only 1.5 million out of 200 million. Only 1.5.
Yep, that's what I saw as well.
Trying to say nothing. Only the hardworking people of this country gave me money.
This made me very sad to see. He's completely gone, dude. He even shit on he even shit on Bernard Sanders. Yet another instance of a right winger looking at a piece of information that he's too stupid to comprehend, and then making it everybody else's problem. Like, not understanding that Bernie Sanders did not get donations from any sort of PACs, let alone the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, if you are a janitor at Pfizer and you gave Bernie $30, that is logged in as a small donation, but yet still logged in as a donation coming from someone who is hired by the pharmaceutical industry. If you don't understand how that works, why are you giving commentary on it as though you get how that works? Why are you so negative? I mean, come on, man. This is a video that got 3.6 million views in a day. What am I supposed to do? This is just filled to the brim with misinformation. Should I just be more receptive? Am I not allowed to be upset?
And it was really about control and money. It had nothing to do with helping people, making people better, giving aid to foreign countries. That's all a cloak and dagger bullshit show. The reality was it's about money.
Yeah, it's
money and influence.
It's always about power and limited resources.
Yeah.
And this was a new game taking place at a level that was hard to believe, and therefore...
new game. USAID, new game. JFK designed it. It's been around as an influence operation for quite some time. It's not new.
And the crazy thing about the NGOs, and this is one of the things that Mike Benz has gone like so deep into, it's essentially like they contribute to the Democratic Party. The government pays them. It's like it's all this like weird sort of...
Dude, what benefit would the Democrats get from putting forth a transgender play in Guatemala? Like, please. The only benefit for American foreign policy later down the line is if we want to say why we are invading Guatemala, let's say, and part of that is because we want to liberate the transgender Guatemalan population. Like, I'll give you Afghanistan as the greatest example. Donald Trump negotiated the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Joe Biden actually followed through on it and pulled out of Afghanistan. The media was up in arms. They freaked out. They were like, why are we leaving Afghanistan? How dare we leave Afghanistan? Look at all the women in Afghanistan that we're leaving behind. They're going to be dominated by the Taliban. That is the liberal version of manufacturing consent for why we must continue occupying Afghanistan. These guys hear that liberal version, the liberal propagandizing of why we must permanently occupy Afghanistan, and think, oh, this is woke nonsense that the Democratic Party is involved with. They don't understand that it is just a part of the consent manufacturing machine. It is still done at the behest of a permanent military occupation. It is not beneficial to the Democrats. It is not beneficial to just the Republicans. It is beneficial to American foreign policy. For Republicans, they don't really need this kind of propaganda. They don't need it at all. For Republicans, they just go, there's Muslims there. We should kill them. And Republicans are like, hell yeah, brother. They did 9/11. Let's go kill them. For liberals, the squishy libs need more motivation to be on board with the woke occupation of Afghanistan. So for them, you say, well, there's a lot of issues with, women's reproductive health in Afghanistan. And there's truth to it. There are a lot of issues with that. So they'll take advantage of real opportunities to help people in an effort to also still justify a military occupation. They'll say, oh, we're doing women's education in Afghanistan. And it's true, they are doing it. And it is truly something that is necessary to do in Afghanistan. But they use that as a way to propagandize why we are continuously occupying militarily a foreign country. These dumbasses don't even realize that they're actively undermining American empire when they advocate against U.S. aid. So I'm just kicking back and observing what is happening. Okay, that's it. I'm not speaking on this. I'm just kicking back and observing. But it is kind of funny that they legitimately think that this is being done at the behest of woke and simultaneously being done to not like engage in some sort of whitewashing of American empire and its actions in the global South, but instead it's to help the Democratic Party somehow. Yeah, not everything deserves a reaction. Just take a seat back and relax. Enjoy the show. Xi Jinping.
So, example, Black Voters Matter Fund's $4 million distribution network was invisible until quantum mapping revealed dozens of subsidiary organizations. The unprecedented mapping reveals a previously hidden web of financial relationships. And that's what it's really all about. And
yes.
One unintentional thing that I never really thought we'd get here is that these guys literally think like Vanguard is woke. Like, they're not anti-Vanguard or anti-BlackRock because these are parasitic forces of capital, but instead they're anti those things because they think those institutions are doing woke. And at this stage, like, I don't know. I don't know how to combat that. You know what I mean? And I don't even know if we should. Okay, yeah, you're right. It's woke, man. You're right. We should abolish private capital. We should abolish financial institutions because they're too woke. I agree. They're woke and Chinese. You know who's the wokest of them all and the gayest and the most Chinese? Like more Chinese than the Chinese Communist Party. Profit healthcare. For-profit healthcare insurance industries. Guys, that's the method. And the CIA. The CIA is so woke and so gay, they're trans, which is the highest stage of being woke and gay. Have you guys thought about this? Do you know how woke the CIA is? They're all trans, all of them, which is why we should shutter the operation. You ain't lying, bro. That's the angle. Yeah, I think we could do like a proletarian revolution if we were to get these guys on board. The only thing they're trained to get mad at is woke and gay. CIA gay and FB bi. I mean, they are kind of doing that. Yeah, look at this. CIA offers a buyout to entire workforce as a part of Trump makeover. I think we actively fried the brains of like tens of millions of Americans where they are so malleable. What you're saying is not too different from leftist leaders using xenophobic language to push out colonialism and establish popular democracy. I'm serious. The CIA is so gay and so woke. You know who's not gay or woke? Trans people, like actual trans people. You know who the real trans people are? The CIA agents. We should be focusing on that instead. Yeah, I saw this and it was amazing. One of the myths, Bronze Age Pervert says, one of the myths the left dearly holds on to is that the USA and CIA knocked off third world communist regimes during Cold War instead of what it actually did, which was to set them up and prop them up. We're reaching the terminal stage of anti-communism where it has now negated itself. The CIA will now be abolished under the very same ideologies that helped deploy to defeat communism. The CIA controls both parties in Congress. Every patriot should be reading Destroying America, the CIA's quest to control the government. Schumer and infamous Liz Cheney are just two of the Democratic and Republican CIA officers who became members of Congress in violation of the Constitution. With Pelosi's blessing, the CIA orchestrated everything on January 6. CIA officers used police covers when they moved barricades aside and ushered protesters over to the Capitol. CIA officers were in the crowd, perpetrating violence and stirring up anger among the protesters. Wray is a CIA officer. He illegally used an official cover as FBI director. And because the CIA could not get rid of Trump with a phony riot, they tried to kill him in July 2024. Official documents state that the CIA officers are detailed by the CIA to be Secret Service agents. We all know they allowed crooks to open fire on Trump. The CIA spent decades building up its control before stealing the 2020 election. Cheney is gone, but the CIA still controls both parties in Congress. To repeat, every patriot should be reading Destroying America, the CIA's quest to control the government. Patriot Victory 2024. Get the facts. The Patriots are in control. The problem is Trump consolidating power, and now there's less oversight and transparency going forward. They're trying to go back to how the CIA operated in the 60s. I mean, that's what I think as well. But also, this is pretty funny. I suspect that it's like, instead of doing like a Guatemalan pro-trans play, they're just going to do like a Guatemalan neo-Nazi play, because like they're still going to fund the arts. You know what I mean? But they're like, I'm actually upset, not because there's a theater play being funded. It's just it's a trans one, you know? So that's what it is. Foreign aid to Israel only. I mean, yeah, that's a definite. That's a given. PragerU for Guatemalans. Yeah, exactly. They're going to do Tom McDonald's, the musical. Yeah, no more contraceptives, no more like anti-AIDS initiatives. They're just going to they're like pro-AIDS now. No, the U.S. Agency for International Development didn't fund a transgender opera in Colombia. Speaking, she listed $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia workplaces. Leave it at it. I don't know about you, but in America, it sounds like the USAID International Development Agency focused primarily on providing vital food aid, extremism prevention projects, and disaster relief to countries around the world, would add transgender opera to its list. Leave It was referring to a 2022 production of an opera called As One, a chamber opera by acclaimed American composer Laura Kaminsky, which focused on the inner journey of Hannah, a transgender woman, and her process of personal discovery from her childhood in a small town. 3 performances of As One were put in Bogota, Colombia, thanks to a co-production between La Compañía Estable and the Universidad de los Andes. The 47,000 figure quoted by Leave It appears to be related to the fact that Universidad de los Andes in Bogota received $25,000 under a State Department program allocated for expanding and strengthening the relationship between the people and the government of the United States and the citizens of the rest of the world. The remaining $22,000 for the production also wasn't funded by the federal government, according to Notice, a Washington publication from the nonprofit, nonpartisan Albitron Journalism Institute. When asked about the lie, Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly told Notice it was immaterial. So when they say we're giving condoms to the Taliban, what they actually mean is family planning and reproductive health services to an area that is desperately in need of such services. But it's funnier and more anger-inducing if you say, we just don't want the Taliban to raw dog. And the same goes for this. This is an initiative for soft power, funding arts programs that promote collaboration between like institutions of higher learning is a soft power initiative, and it's marginal. It's like a little bit of money that you're giving, but then it sounds a lot better. Oh, they're funding a transgender play that they wrote. Like a bunch of government stooges sat down and were like, how can we make the Guatemalans more trans? Like, that's not what it is. Does that make sense? Musk claims on X followed the removal of 2 top security officials at the United States Agency for International Development. Bunch of radical lunatics is what Trump called them. Musk tweeted a baseless claim that USAID funded a bioweapon research, including COVID-19, that killed millions of people. From day one, this administration has demonstrated that they were more focused on blowing up an agency than actually understanding what it is and what it does. The report details how an economic and political crisis in neighboring Venezuela led to an influx of around 2.5 million refugees seeking sanctuary in Colombia that year. At the same time, almost 1 million Colombians who had emigrated to Venezuela returned home, putting a huge strain on food supplies and local health services. In response, USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance prioritized the provision of emergency food assistance, including cash transfers for food, vouchers redeemable in local markets, and hot meals, not operas.